A church burns, snow falls like ash. A mustang cries into the night. Children trapped, smoke rising. A widow steps into the fire. A man once despised fights to save them. And then, whispers begin. A priest reveals secrets buried in a ledger. A gun is raised against truth. A father's heart breaks as he sees the medallion on a boy's chest, his lost son. But dawn is coming. Justice rides through the smoke. Voices rise from the ashes. And as the sun breaks, a boy whispers, "Father," while the mustang stands tall in the snow. Proof that even when fire takes everything, hope still survives. Snow should have meant silence, but on that night in Riverton, silence was split open by fire. St. Augustine's church, the town's pride and anchor, was burning, its spire clawing at the winter sky like a torch raised by some vengeful god. People thought they were watching a tragedy, an accident sent by fate, but they were wrong. What burned here would not simply be timber and glass. It would reveal secrets long buried, test loyalties, and change Riverton forever. Stay with this story, because every cry, every hoofbeat, and every ember carries the weight of truth. And if these tales of courage and redemption strike something in you, don't just watch. Share your thoughts below, subscribe, and let the voices of Riverton find a home with you. The town square lay lit by fire's furious glow. Snowflakes hissed into steam before they could touch the cobblestones. The stained glass of St. Augustine cracked and burst, shards spilling holy colors across the snow until they melted into dark puddles. Smoke rose heavy, drowning the stars, blotting the moon. People gathered in chaos. Men rushed with buckets. Women screamed names. Children clung to skirts, eyes wide and wet with terror. Horses tied to posts reared and kicked, sensing doom. The bell tolled once, a hollow cry, before its metal split under the heat with a deafening crack. The tower shook. The church was dying. On the edge of the crowd, apart from the rest, stood Jonas McGraw, 40 years old, tall but lean, his frame carved more by hardship than strength. A pale scar cut across his cheek, sharpening features already hardened by years on the trail. His eyes, storm gray and heavy, carried a weight people didn't want to meet. His coat was patched, boots cracked, revolver at his side, more like a memory than a weapon. The people of Riverton didn't speak to him, not unless forced. Once he had been a rancher with land, a wife, a future, but fever had taken Eliza and debt had taken the ranch. He returned years later with nothing but shadows, and they treated him as if his very presence carried misfortune. Beside him pawed Ashfire, his mustang stallion. The horse's chestnut coat shone like copper under the flames, black mane whipping wild, a white blaze running sharp down his nose. Muscles rippled as he stomped, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the church as though he could sense what no man dared admit. Where Jonas endured in silence, Ashfire burned with restless life. A piercing whinny cut through the crowd's shouts. Ashfire reared, hooves striking sparks from the frozen stones, nostrils flaring at the burning doors. Jonas gritted his teeth, tugged hard at the reins, but the stallion refused to turn away. And then Jonas saw him, Father Benedict. The old priest staggered through the smoke, white robes blackened, beard scorched. His arms reached out as though begging heaven for salvation. He stumbled down the steps, knees buckling, and collapsed on the snow. Coughs racked his chest, smoke spilling from his lips. His red-rimmed eyes found not the crowd, but Jonas. The children, Benedict rasped. His trembling hand clutched at Jonas's coat, fingers clawing deep. In the cellar, save them. The word shredded his throat. His chest heaved once more, then stilled, his head falling limp against the snow. The crowd gasped. Men froze with buckets in hand. Mothers pulled children tighter. Fear rooted them as beams cracked overhead. And then, Martha, Widow Monroe. She burst from the crowd, skirts dark with soot, her auburn hair half loosened from its bun, eyes flashing. She was 36, strong-faced, hands scarred from work at her small farm. For years she had spoken against Jonas, bitter with blame that had no rightful place to land. And yet, here she was, throwing a pail of water across the flames, shouting for others to follow. "Don't just stand there," her voice cut sharp, strong. "We'll lose them all if we do nothing." For a moment the crowd wavered, stunned that Martha of all people should be first to act. Jonas's eyes met hers across the firelit square. Old bitterness burned between them, unspoken but alive. Ashfire stamped again, head tossing toward the burning door, as though demanding Jonas move. The mustang's cry echoed off the stone like a call to arms. Jonas's jaw tightened. He could not turn away now, not with Benedict's words searing his ears, not with Martha watching. Jonas pulled his coat tighter, hand brushing the pocket inside. The silver locket rested there, worn and scratched. Eliza's face faded behind glass. Her smile, gentle, stubborn, flickered in his mind like a flame against the dark. He touched it as he always did when doubt threatened to break him. "Guide me, Eliza," he whispered, breath lost in smoke. He looked up at Martha, who had turned back to rally the townsfolk, her eyes full of fire, not born of flame. And for the first time in years, Jonas felt something stir. Not trust, not yet, but the sense that maybe he wasn't the only one still fighting. He turned to Ashfire. "Let's go." The stallion lunged, carrying Jonas forward into the choking smoke of St. Augustine. Within the blaze, Jonas saw Benedict's hand slip lifeless to the snow. His words still hung in the air. "The children in the cellar." Jonas vanished into the fire, the church groaning above him as the crowd and Martha watched in breathless silence. Jonas McGraw vanished into the blaze, Father Benedict's final words still echoing. "The children in the cellar." Smoke pressed down like a storm cloud, heat clawing at his skin. Ashfire lunged beside him, chestnut coat streaked with ash, hooves hammering against the church's stone floor. Jonas knew there was no time. Somewhere beneath this inferno, lives were slipping away. He pushed through the nave, past broken pews collapsing into flame, past shattered glass crunching under his boots. His eyes watered, his throat burned, but he pressed forward. Ahead, the altar sagged under falling beams, and to the left, he saw it. The side passage Benedict had tried to describe. Its door was swollen with heat, frame twisted, wood blackened. Jonas lowered his shoulder and rammed it once. The door groaned but held. Ashfire reared, screamed, and lashed out with both hooves. Wood splintered, iron hinges tore loose. Together, they forced the passage open, stepping into smoke-thick darkness. The air shifted, less fire, more damp stone, but heavy with soot that clung to the lungs. Jonas raised the cracked lantern he'd grabbed near the entrance. Its light flickered weak, barely pushing against the gloom. He coughed into his sleeve and pressed on. Against the wall, half-slumped, lay Father Benedict. The priest was barely conscious, lips moving without sound. His once white robe was streaked with soot, his lined face smeared with ash. He looked far older than the man who had stood each Sunday at Riverton's pulpit. His strength burned away in the smoke. Jonas knelt, shaking his shoulder. "Stay with me, Father." The priest's eyes flickered open, red-rimmed. His voice was thin, cracked like glass. "The stair, hidden, in the wall, take them out." Please, Jonas followed his weak gesture, but the wall looked solid, Nothing but dark stone blocks slick with soot. He cursed under his breath. Then ash fire struck the ground. The stallion's hooves rang sharp against the floor, head tossing, ears pricked at something Jonas could not yet see. The horse pawed again, nostrils flaring, snorting at the stone. Jonas narrowed his eyes. "Show me, boy." Ashfire lunged forward, striking the same patch of wall. Dust rained down. Jonas wiped his sleeve across the stone, and there it was. An iron handle, set flush in the rock, almost invisible in shadow. He gripped it and pulled. With a groan, stone shifted. A hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling into blackness. Cold air rushed out, thick with oil and smoke. Jonas turned back to Benedict, who lay slumped, breathing shallow. "I'll come back for you," he promised, though the priest's eyes had already slipped closed. There was no time to waste. Lantern in one hand, reins in the other, Jonas urged Ashfire forward. The stallion didn't hesitate. They descended together into the dark. The stairwell swallowed them, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The deeper they went, the worse the air grew, thick with fumes, metallic, unnatural. Then Jonas heard it, faint at first, then undeniable. Tick, tick, tick. He froze. His skin prickled. That sound did not belong here, not in a church, not in a cellar. Ashfire snorted, ears flicking, restless. Jonas tightened his grip on the lantern and forced himself downward. The ticking grew louder, steady, mechanical, a heartbeat not his own. The stairs ended in a vaulted cellar, low-ceilinged, walls slick with condensation. Smoke drifted down through cracks, curling along the ceiling like black water. Jonas lifted the lantern high. At first he saw only shadows, then movement. Huddled against the far wall were 6 children, faces streaked black with soot, clothes ragged, eyes wide with terror. The eldest, a boy of 12, tried to shield the smaller ones, arms spread though his body shook. Beside him, a girl of maybe 10 held the hand of a younger sibling, tears cutting clean paths through the ash on her cheeks. The youngest was no more than 4, sobbing into the crook of her brother's arm, their eyes fixed on Jonas as though he were a ghost. None of them made a sound, save for choked coughing. It was the silence of those too scared to cry, and over their shallow breathing rose the ticking, steady, relentless. Jonas's stomach clenched. He didn't need to see it yet to know. Someone had placed death here with these children. The lantern flame trembled in his hand. Ashfire stepped forward, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring as though ready to fight the invisible danger. Jonas swallowed, forcing his voice steady. "It's all right," he called to the children, though his chest felt hollow. "You're not alone now." But in his ears, louder than his words, louder than the fire above, louder than his own heartbeat, was the tick, tick, tick of something waiting to end it all. The cellar reeked of oil and smoke, lantern light trembling in Jonas's hand. 6 terrified children clung to one another, their wide eyes reflecting the flame. And still it was there, the relentless ticking in the dark, steady as a death march. Jonas's chest clenched. He had found them, but danger was coiled all around. Above ground, the fire's roar mixed with the panicked cries of Riverton. Snow fell, only to vanish in hissing steam where it touched the blaze. The townsfolk stumbled back from the church, their faces pale with terror. Martha Monroe had no time for fear. She pushed forward through the chaos, her soot-streaked skirts dragging through the snow. 36 years old, hair of deep auburn streaked with gray at the temples. Her face was strong, plain, and marked by grief. Widowhood had carved out her softness, left behind calloused hands from years of farm work and eyes sharpened by distrust. For years she had carried bitterness toward Jonas McGraw, blaming him, wrongly, for choices that had left scars in her life. Yet tonight, as she watched him vanish into the fire, she realized old hatred mattered little. She grabbed a bucket from a boy too stunned to move and threw the water across the flames. Steam erupted, useless against the inferno, but she would not stand idle. Her eyes swept the square and froze. The town's fire wagon was there, horses still hitched, hoses coiled. Martha ran to it, heart hammering. Her hand seized the nozzle, pulled, but the hose was bound. A heavy chain and padlock cinched it tight. She followed it down to the hydrant and found the valve had been twisted shut. The padlock was new, the chain still gleamed with polish. "What in God's name?" she whispered. Her gut clenched. No accident would bind a hose in the middle of a fire. Behind her, the firemen stumbled forward, faces flushed, arms full of buckets. One man dropped his and reached for the hydrant. "The line's dry," he shouted. Another cursed, fumbling with the pump. "No water! Nothing's coming through!" Confusion swept the crew. And then a voice cut through it, smooth and commanding. "Stand down!" Martha whirled. Victor Hall strode across the snow with the confidence of a man who believed the world itself obeyed him. 52 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept neatly back. He wore a dark wool coat trimmed in fur, far too fine for a night of fire and ruin. His boots shone despite the snow. His eyes, cold, calculating, never wavered. Hall was Riverton's deputy mayor, a man of polished speeches and practiced handshakes. To some, he was the town's savior, builder of progress. To others, he was a vulture, buying debts cheap and selling hope at a profit. Tonight, his presence chilled Martha to the bone. He raised a gloved hand, gesturing to the fire crew. "Back! That building is lost. Risk no more lives on a hopeless cause. But there are children inside." One firefighter protested, sweat streaking through soot. Hall's jaw tightened, his voice slicing like steel. "That's an order. You'll find no water flowing here tonight. Withdraw before you make martyrs of yourselves." The men faltered. Without water, they were powerless. One by one, they lowered their buckets and stepped back, shame and fear etched on their faces. Martha's fists clenched. She looked again at the chained hydrant, then at Hall's unflinching gaze. And it struck her. This fire was no act of God. It was no accident. It was orchestrated. The fuel on the snow, the locked hoses, the silence of a man who should have led the rescue. Her breath caught, fury coursing through her veins. "You planned this, Hall. You lit this fire to cover something darker." She shouted over the wind. "Why is the water cut, Hall? Why are the hoses chained?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Hall's smile did not falter, but his eyes sharpened, dangerous. "Control yourself, Widow Monroe. This is no time for wild accusations." But Martha saw the truth written in his stillness, in the smug way he watched the church burn. She understood. The fire was meant to erase, to hide sins buried beneath St. Augustine, perhaps money, perhaps secrets, and perhaps worse. Beneath the church, Jonas's lantern flickered over the frightened faces of the children. Ash fire pawed at the stone floor, ears twitching, muscles tense. The ticking continued, faster now, echoing through the smoke. Jonas knew they had to move. He urged the children toward the stair, his voice steady, though dread gnawed at him. "One at a time. Stay close. We'll get you out." The eldest boy swallowed hard, eyes wide but unblinking. "Mister, is it true? Are we going to die here?" Jonas gripped his shoulder. "Not if I have breath left in me." "Go." The boy nodded, guiding the younger ones toward Ashfire, who knelt low, steadying himself so two small children could cling to his back. Jonas lifted the smallest girl into his arms. her frail body light as a rag doll. Then the ground shuddered. A groan thundered through the beams above. Jonas looked up just in time to see a massive support timber crack, splinters bursting into the smoke. "No!" The beam came crashing down, slamming across the exit, sealing the passage in a choking wall of wood and ash. The stairway was gone. Jonas staggered back, shielding the child in his arms as dust and smoke swallowed them. The children screamed, ash fire reared, eyes rolling white. The way out had been cut off. They were trapped. The cellar roared like a beast. The timber had crashed down, choking the stairway with smoke and splinters. Jonas pressed the smallest child against his chest, shielding her from falling dust. Behind him, the other children screamed, ash fire rearing in panic. The way out was gone. Jonas's jaw set. He would not let it end here. He forced his shoulder against the beam. The wood groaned, heavy as stone, pressing down on the pile of rubble that blocked the passage. His muscles strained, breath tearing through smoke. Every inch it shifted brought a rain of sparks and dust. His vision blurred, sweat stinging his eyes. "Move, damn you," Jonas growled, but the timber would not yield. It was too large, too wedged. Ashfire screamed, then lunged forward. The Mustang's chest hit the beam, hooves gouging at the stone floor. Together, man and horse strained against the weight. The beam shifted again, groaned louder, dust pouring from above. The children's eyes widened with a flicker of hope. Then Jonas heard a voice through the chaos. "Jonas!" He turned. Through the smoke at the ruined door, a figure burst in, Martha Monroe. Her skirts were black with soot, her face streaked with ash, hair half loosened from its bun. Her breath came ragged, but her eyes burned fierce. She carried a length of broken timber, using it as a lever. "Get back!" she shouted. Jonas pulled the children aside as Martha jammed the timber beneath the fallen beam. Her arms trembled with strain, veins rising against pale skin. "Push, McGraw!" He threw his shoulder against the wood again, ash fire lunging beside him. The beam shuddered, lifted by inches. Martha screamed with effort, face twisting, and for one suspended heartbeat, it rose enough to reveal a gap. "Go!" Jonas barked. The eldest boy grabbed the younger ones, shoving them through the narrow space. Two children scrambled under the gap, coughing, faces black with soot. Jonas seized the twins, lifted them one by one, and pressed them to ash fire. The Mustang lowered himself, steady as stone, letting the small bodies cling to his back. He turned his head, eyes flashing in the lantern glow, then let out a high, piercing whinny that echoed through the cellar like a call to salvation. The sound startled Jonas. It wasn't fear, it was command, a summons to follow. The horse lunged forward, carrying the twins toward the gap, hooves steady despite the rubble. Jonas shoved the eldest boy through after them, then pulled Martha back as the beam threatened to fall again. For a moment, the cellar was nearly empty. Only Jonas, Martha, Ashfire, and the last child remained. Jonas cradled the smallest girl, her breath shallow, eyes glazed. He lifted her toward Martha. "Take her!" Martha caught the girl in her arms, staggering back toward the gap. Her eyes found Jonas's for one brief instant. No bitterness, no blame, only fierce resolve. Then she slipped through with the child into the smoke beyond. Jonas turned to the last boy, the eldest, who lingered by his side, refusing to move. His thin frame trembled with exhaustion, but his chin lifted with stubborn pride. Jonas frowned. "Go on," he ordered. "Get out." The boy shook his head. "Not without you." Something caught Jonas's eye then, a glint at the boy's throat. A medallion, round and silver, hanging from a frayed cord. Jonas froze. His heart stumbled in his chest. That medallion, he knew it. The etching of a rose, worn and faint, the same pattern Eliza had once worn. His wife, gone these many years. She had buried that token with their unborn child. At least, he had believed. But here it was, gleaming on the chest of this boy. Blood roared in Jonas's ears. He staggered, words breaking from him. Where did you get that?" The boy touched the medallion, eyes wide with confusion. "It was my mother's. They said she gave it to me before she was gone." Jonas's throat closed. The child's eyes, gray like storm clouds, like his own. The jawline, the stubborn lift of his chin. Memory slammed into him, painful, blinding. Could it be? Could this boy be his own flesh, lost but returned? "Your name," Jonas gasped, choking on smoke. "Tell me your name." The boy coughed, voice hoarse. "Elias." Jonas nearly dropped to his knees. Elias. The name Eliza had chosen, the name they had whispered once in a cabin filled with dreams. The boy before him was his son. The beam above groaned again, threatening to fall. Jonas shook himself, seized Elias by the shoulder. "You have to go. Now." "I won't leave you," Elias cried, tears cutting through the soot on his cheeks. Jonas gritted his teeth, forcing his voice steady. "You will, because I'll be right behind you." He shoved the boy toward the gap. Ashfire screamed again, hooves striking sparks, urging them both forward. Elias stumbled through, vanishing into smoke. Jonas pressed one last heave against the beam, dragging himself under as it sagged low. For a heartbeat, he thought it would crush him. Then Ashfire braced beside him, shoving with desperate strength, long enough for them both to slip out into the freezing night. Snow struck Jonas's face like knives of ice. He gasped, lungs drinking air as though for the first time. The children huddled in Martha's arms, weeping. Elias stared at him, eyes wide with something between recognition and disbelief. Jonas bent over, coughing, clutching his ribs. But there was no time to rest. The church groaned behind them. The bell tower swayed, its timbers blackened, cracks splitting wide. Martha's eyes lifted in horror. "Jonas, look!" He turned. The tower leaned, ready to fall, its weight aimed squarely at the narrow exit where they stood. Their one path to freedom was about to be sealed in fire and ruin. The bell tower groaned above them, tilting in the smoke, ready to crash down on their only escape. Jonas clutched Elias close, his lungs searing, but the tower did not fall, not yet. The fire raged, but the path cleared just enough for the survivors to stumble into the open square. Snow stung their faces. Villagers parted, gasping at the sight. Jonas McGraw, the outcast cowboy, leading 6 soot-streaked children with Martha at his side and the great mustang Ashfire rearing in defiance. For a heartbeat, the crowd was silent. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "Jonas!" He turned. Through the drifting smoke, Father Benedict emerged, supported by 2 men, his robes black with soot, his face ghost pale. Yet his hand clutched something tight against his chest. A leather-bound ledger, edges scorched but intact. His voice was weak but clear. "Take it, Jonas. The truth must not burn with me." Jonas staggered forward, Elias still clinging to his coat. He reached for the ledger. Its weight was more than paper. It felt like judgment itself. The old priest's eyes, rimmed with firelight, bored into him. "This book, it records every coin, every name. Hall used God's house to wash his sins." Gasps rippled through the villagers. Martha's head snapped toward Benedict, then to the figure stepping forward at the edge of the square. Victor Hall. The deputy mayor looked unchanged by the fire, his fur-trimmed coat still immaculate, his hair silver and swept, his stance calm amid panic. but his eyes, ice gray, unflinching, burned with fury at the sight of the ledger in Jonas's hands. "Give it to me, McGraw," Hall said, voice sharp as steel. His entourage, 3 burly men with soot-smeared coats, pushed through the crowd. Each carried themselves like hired fists, not townsfolk. Jonas's hand tightened on the ledger. Elias stepped closer, as if to shield him. Ashfire pawed the ground, muscles coiled, head tossing. Hall raised his chin. "That book belongs to Riverton's leadership. It is a matter of civic order, not for a disgraced drifter and a grieving widow to flaunt." Martha stepped forward, face smeared with ash, eyes ablaze. "Order?" she spat. "You chained the hoses, cut the water, poured fuel on holy ground. This fire was no accident. It was your design." The villagers murmured, some gasping, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Hall spread his hands in false calm. Hysteria. Grief speaks louder than reason. You will all see the truth once the dust settles. But Martha did not falter. She reached into her soot-stained apron and drew out a smaller, leather-bound notebook. She held it high. "Then what of this? My own hand recorded every lock, every chain, every order you barked while children burned inside. You can burn the church hall, but you cannot burn the truth." The crowd erupted in shouts. Some cried for justice, others for silence. Fear and anger clashed like sparks in dry grass. Hall's mask cracked, his lip curled, fury spilling past his practiced composure. He slashed his hand toward his men. "Take it," both ledgers, and silenced them. The thugs moved forward. Ashfire screamed. The mustang surged, hooves striking the frozen earth, eyes blazing. He reared high, mane whipping, and brought both hooves down with a thunderous crack. The ground shook. The first of Hall's men stumbled back, clutching his arm. Another lost his footing entirely. The villagers gasped. The horse stood like a wall of fire and muscle, refusing to yield. "Stay back," Jonas warned, his voice raw but firm. "This horse will break the bones of any man who comes closer." For a moment, even Hall's men hesitated. The balance hung. Then Hall's fury boiled over. His hand went to his coat. With a flash of steel, he drew a revolver. Its barrel gleamed in the firelight, aimed squarely at Jonas McGraw. The crowd recoiled, screams cutting the night. Mothers dragged children back. Men stumbled in panic. Martha froze, eyes wide, her notebook still in hand. Hall's voice thundered, louder than the fire. "You will hand me that ledger, McGraw, or you will die where you stand." Ashfire hissed, pawing the earth, ready to charge. Jonas felt Elias clutch his arm, trembling but refusing to let go. The ledger burned heavy in his hands, the weight of every lie, every betrayal pressing down on him. The square fell silent, all breath caught in throats. The night narrowed to one line of steel between Victor Hall and Jonas McGraw. The revolver gleamed in Victor Hall's hand, pointed squarely at Jonas McGraw. The crowd gasped, retreating as one. Mothers clutched their children, men shrank back, and silence swallowed the square. Jonas stood rooted, the ledger heavy in his grasp. Ashfire's ears pinned back, his hooves striking sparks on the frozen ground, muscles quivering with fury. Martha stood beside Jonas, her notebook clutched to her chest, though her hands shook. Hall's voice tore the night. "The book. Now, or your blood spills on this snow." For a heartbeat, it seemed the outcast cowboy would fall alone, shot down before the town that had long despised him. Then, hoofbeats, not ashfires, but a dozen more, pounding across the square. Out of the smoke came riders, cloaks whipping in the firelight. At their head, a tall figure raised his badge, the silver star of the state. "Drop the gun, Hall," the officer thundered. "By order of the state, you are under arrest." The square erupted. Gasps turned to cries. Hall's face drained of color, but his hand did not lower. Instead, he swung the revolver toward the officer, finger tightening on the trigger. A shot cracked, but not his. One of the deputies fired first. Hall's pistol spun from his hand, clattering across the snow. He staggered, clutching his arm, fury etched deep even in defeat. His men rushed forward, but the officers were faster. Shackles clamped around wrists, chains bit into flesh, and Hall's empire crumbled in the space of a minute. The villagers stood frozen, staring at the fall of the man they had once called leader. Some shouted curses, others wept, still others looked away, ashamed. The officer turned, his voice steady. "Who holds the proof?" Jonas stepped forward, ledger in hand. The crowd murmured, some in disbelief, others in awe. For the first time, they saw not a drifter or a scapegoat, but a man who had walked through fire, carrying truth. Father Benedict, pale but standing, raised his voice, hoarse but clear. "Jonas McGraw saved these children. He risked what none of you would, and he now holds the record of every sin committed under this man's name." Martha moved beside Jonas, lifting her own notebook high. "And I have my witness too. Every lock, every chain, every order given tonight. Let no one say this is hearsay. The truth is carved in ink and ash." For a long breath the villagers were silent. Then, one voice rose. "He's right!" Another followed. "McGraw saved them." Then a chorus. "Jonas! Jonas!" The square that had once spat his name now thundered with it, voices ringing like the church bell that no longer stood. Jonas's chest tightened, his throat thick. He had not sought their praise, but it came, raw and undeniable. The fire burned lower now, reduced to embers and smoke. Snow swirled through the ruins, covering ash like a shroud. The villagers gathered, murmuring about what should come next. Some spoke of rebuilding the church, but others, especially those whose children had been saved, shook their heads. Martha's voice carried. "The walls are gone, but let us build not for stone and sermons, but for those who suffered most. These children need a home, not a monument to power. From these ashes let us raise a new house, the St. Augustine Children's Center." The crowd fell silent. Then slowly, nods spread. Agreement rose like dawn breaking over dark hills. The decision was made. Jonas glanced at Martha. Their eyes met. Two lives once tangled in bitterness, now bound in shared purpose. No words were needed. The first blush of morning touched the sky, pale gold over the snow. Smoke drifted thin and gray, no longer choking, but fading. Ashfire stood in the square, his chestnut coat gleaming despite soot, mane tossing in the cold wind. The children clustered around him, their small hands gripping his neck, burying faces in his warmth. The great mustang lowered his head, eyes soft, as if he too understood what had been won. Jonas knelt in the snow. Elias stood before him, soot streaking his young face. The medallion at his throat caught the light of dawn. Jonas's voice cracked. "That name you carry, Elias. Your mother chose it. She was my wife. She is gone now. But you—" His voice broke. Elias's lip trembled. He stepped forward, hesitant, then flung his arms around Jonas's neck. "Cha!" The word pierced deeper than any bullet, warmer than any fire. Jonas crushed the boy to his chest, tears cutting clean paths down his smoke-blackened face. Around them, the villagers fell silent, many weeping openly. Father Benedict bowed his head. Martha placed a hand on Jonas's shoulder, her eyes glistening. Ashfire whinnied once, sharp and proud, as the sun broke full over Riverton. The sound echoed off the ruined walls, not of mourning, but of rebirth. Sometimes, the fires that tear down the walls around us are the same flames that clear a path toward redemption. Jonas McGraw walked into the smoke as a man shunned, but stepped into the dawn as a father restored, a protector of children, and a soul no longer burdened by exile. Ashfire's courage, Martha's defiance, and a town's awakening remind us that from the deepest ashes, hope can rise, and that even those most cast aside can carry the light back home. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're watching from, and let us know what part of this story touched your heart the most. If you'd like to walk beside us through more tales of resilience, love, and second chances, please subscribe so you'll never miss the journeys waiting just beyond the horizon.